Have you ever noticed how easy it is to mistake emotional impact for actual change? You hear something powerful. Maybe it's in a podcast, a conversation, a book, a late-night realization that hits you right in the chest. And for a moment, it honestly feels like your whole perspective has shifted. You feel clearer, lighter, more aware. You sit there thinking, okay, this is it. I finally get it now. But then a few days pass, and somehow you're back inside the same patterns again. Same anxieties, same reactions, same habits, same loops. And I think most people secretly find this confusing. Because if the insight felt real, why didn't it actually change anything? I've been thinking about that a lot lately, and honestly, I don't think the problem is that people lack information anymore. If anything, we're drowning in it. You can spend 10 minutes online and hear enough psychological insight to completely rethink your life. But information and transformation are clearly not the same thing. Otherwise, everyone listening to podcasts would already be at peace. And I think part of the problem is that the mind is constantly translating reality instead of directly experiencing it. The second we hear something meaningful, the brain rushes in to categorize it. Compare it. Attach it to something we already know. You can actually feel this happening in real time. Someone says something honest, and immediately the mind goes, oh yeah, this is basically like that other book I read. Or, that reminds me of this philosophy. Or, I already know this. And maybe that sounds harmless, but I think something important gets lost there. Because sometimes the mind uses knowledge to avoid direct contact with reality. It turns living insight into mental furniture. Something decorative, something to collect. And the weird part is, the more intellectually sophisticated people become, the easier this trap is to fall into. You can build an entire identity around being self-aware, around understanding human behavior, around knowing the language of healing or mindfulness or psychology, and still be completely disconnected from yourself underneath it. I've met people who can explain every emotional pattern they have while still being deeply trapped inside those patterns. And honestly, I think most of us do this in smaller ways. We keep trying to think our way out of things we probably need to fully experience instead. That's a hard thing to admit, especially if you're someone who genuinely values understanding. Because understanding feels productive, feels safe, but there's a difference between understanding pain and actually staying present long enough to feel it without escaping. And most people never really learn how to do that. The mind is just too fast. The second discomfort appears, it starts moving, explaining, fixing, distracting, anything to avoid direct contact with what's happening right now. And modern life makes this so much worse. Because now there's an endless supply of escape routes. You feel restless? Open your phone? You feel lonely? Scroll. You feel uncomfortable in silence. Put something on in the background. Most people are almost never fully here anymore. And honestly, I don't mean that in some spiritual way. I mean physically here, in their body, in the room, in the actual experience they're having. A lot of people live almost entirely in their head now. Constant thought, constant commentary, constant internal movement. And after a while, you lose touch with what direct experience even feels like. That's probably why so many people feel emotionally exhausted all the time. Not necessarily because life is unbearable, but because the mind never stops interfering with it. I had this realization recently. You can't think your way into presence. You can understand every concept about peace and still never actually feel peaceful. Because the body and the mind process reality very differently. The mind narrates. The body experiences, and I think people underestimate how much clarity returns when attention drops out of constant thinking and back into physical experience. Even simple things. Feeling your feet on the floor while someone is talking to you. Actually noticing your breathing instead of just thinking about your stress, listening without preparing your response. It sounds almost too simple, which is probably why people skip over it. The mind wants something dramatic, something advanced, but honestly, I think a lot of people already know enough. They've just never allowed what they know to fully reach them. That's the difference. Information stays in the head, real change reaches the body. You can feel when something finally lands beyond thought. It becomes quieter, less performative. You stop trying so hard to appear aware, and instead you become a little more honest, a little more present, a little less divided inside yourself. And I don't think this happens through force. I don't think people heal by aggressively trying to optimize themselves every second. I think change happens when the constant inner interference starts settling down. When the mind stops interrupting every experience long enough for reality to actually touch you. That's why I think so many people feel disconnected now. Not because they're broken, but because they've spent years relating to life through commentary instead of contact. Thinking instead of sensing. Analyzing instead of arriving. And eventually, the distance between you and your own experience becomes so normal that you stop noticing it. Until maybe one quiet moment finally cuts through all the noise. And you suddenly realize how long it's been since you fully felt anything without mentally editing it. That realization can change people. Not instantly, not magically, but honestly, because now the experience is real. Not conceptual, not performed, not turned into identity. Just real. So maybe this week, pay attention to how quickly your mind rushes to interpret everything. Notice how fast it labels, compares, explains, and for a few moments each day, try staying with the raw experience before the commentary begins. Before the analysis, before the mental noise, you might realize that clarity was never completely missing. It was just buried underneath constant interpretation. Thanks for listening, and until next time, pay attention to the moments where your mind interrupts reality before it fully reaches you.